You're standing in the pitch-black hallway of an abandoned hospital. The air is thick with silence until you hear it. The sound of a rusty wheelchair rolling toward you, but there's no one there. Just the chair moving on its own. Are you brave enough to find out why? This isn't your typical ghost story. What we're about to reveal comes from one of the most haunted hospitals in the world, where strange things happen that can't be explained. Today, we'll uncover the terrifying truth behind the infamous moving wheelchair and the restless spirits still roaming these halls. Stick with us as we unravel the dark history of this place and share chilling encounters that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the supernatural. Once, this hospital was a place of hope and care for the terminally ill. It was known for its cutting-edge treatments and was a bustling hub with doctors, nurses, and patients filling the hallways. But behind its walls, dark secrets began to unfold. A series of unexplained deaths, some under mysterious circumstances, cast a shadow over the hospital. Soon after, the once busy facility was abandoned, leaving only its empty rooms and unsettling silence behind. Locals soon whispered about the hospital's dark history, claiming that the spirits of the patients who never left still wandered its halls. Among the many eerie tales, one stood out: the legend of the moving wheelchair. People swore they saw it rolling down the hallways on its own, its rusty wheels creaking as if guided by invisible hands. No one could explain it, and the more time passed, the more this legend grew, adding to the hospital's haunted reputation. The hospital had a promising start when it first opened its doors. In the early years, it was hailed as a beacon of medical progress. Doctors here were pioneers, experimenting with new treatments and methods that pushed the boundaries of modern medicine. It was a place of hope for families with nowhere else to turn. But as time went on, things began to change, and not for the better. Behind the polished exterior of innovation, there were whispers of malpractice and unethical experiments. Rumors spread about surgeries that went terribly wrong, and patients whose conditions worsened under the care of doctors who were too eager to try untested treatments. Some say these doctors pushed the boundaries of medical ethics in search of fame, using the hospital as a testing ground for experimental procedures. One particularly chilling story tells of a group of patients who were subjected to dangerous surgeries that were never fully explained or documented. These patients were left in agony, and many never woke up. As the hospital's reputation began to crumble, so did its walls. There were too many unexplained deaths, too many patients who vanished under suspicious circumstances. Soon, the hospital became infamous, and the public started to avoid it. The once bustling facility was slowly abandoned, its hallways left to decay. Yet even in its emptiness, the hospital's dark past seemed to linger, as though the suffering and pain from those years had never really left. As the hospital continued to crumble in silence, it became a prime location for urban explorers searching for the thrill of uncovering its dark secrets. Many ventured inside, armed with cameras and flashlights, eager to document what remained of the eerie building. Some left with photos and stories to tell. Others, however, left with something far more unsettling. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a group of explorers who decided to investigate the hospital's lower levels, where the moving wheelchair had been sighted on more than one occasion. At first, they wandered through the dusty, forgotten hallways, snapping photos of the rotting walls and broken equipment. Everything seemed quiet until they reached the old patient ward. In the distance, they saw it, the rusty wheelchair, positioned in the middle of the hallway as if waiting for someone. At first, they thought it was just a leftover relic of the past, but then something happened that sent chills down their spines. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the wheelchair began to move. No wind, no push, just the sound of the rusty wheels creaking against the old floorboards. It rolled forward, inch by inch, as if guided by an unseen force. The group stood frozen, unsure of what to do. One of them, a young man named Jake, decided to approach the chair to investigate further. But just as he got close, something terrifying happened. The wheelchair slowly began to turn toward him, its wheels scraping louder with every movement. It was as if it recognized him and was coming for him. Panic set in, and Jake, terrified, bolted from the room, sprinting through the halls as fast as he could. His friends, equally shaken, quickly followed, barely escaping the hospital without looking back. What they saw that day would stay with them forever. Was it a trick of the light? Or had they witnessed something truly supernatural? Either way, the moving wheelchair remained one of the most terrifying encounters in the hospital's long history of eerie sightings. The moment you step inside the abandoned hospital, everything changes. The air is thick with an unnatural stillness, as if the building itself is holding its breath. A heavy, damp smell clings to the walls, the unmistakable scent of mildew and decay. It makes your stomach turn, but there's no escape from it. Every breath you take feels heavier, like the air is pressing down on you. The hallways stretch on, endless and cold. The walls are cracked, the floors are covered in layers of dust, and yet the sense of something watching you is undeniable. Every step echoes, amplifying even the softest sound. It's as if the building itself is listening, waiting for you to make a sound. And then there's the quiet. The silence is deafening, broken only by the occasional creaking of the old structure, shifting, or the sound of rats skittering in the shadows. But sometimes you hear more than that. Distant whispers, faint but unmistakable, seem to come from nowhere. They are too soft to understand, but too clear to ignore. Some say they're the voices of the long-gone patients, still trapped in the corridors, never leaving the place they died. And if you're lucky, or unlucky, you might catch a glimpse of something moving just at the edge of your vision. A shadow that doesn't belong, crossing the hall too quickly for your mind to process. The flicker of light from your flashlight might catch it, but when you turn to look, there's nothing there. Yet, the sensation of being watched never fades. In the oppressive silence of the abandoned hospital, these eerie moments seem all too real, as if the building itself is alive, pulsing with memories of those who once walked its halls. As investigators delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding the moving wheelchair, they began to uncover eerie clues that seemed to suggest a darker history. Near the wheelchair, they discovered an old, weathered patient logbook, its pages yellowed with age. Flipping through the pages revealed unsettling entries, notes about surgeries that had gone wrong, strange symptoms that never had clear explanations, and most disturbing of all, multiple accounts of patients mentioning a presence in the room with them. One entry, dated just days before the hospital was abandoned, described a patient's terrifying encounter with a shadowy figure that followed them, never leaving their side. But that wasn't the only chilling discovery. As the investigators moved around the wheelchair, they noticed something even more disturbing: bloodstains on the floor, dried and darkened by years of neglect. It appeared as if someone had been dragged across the room, leaving a trail behind them. The investigators couldn't help but wonder, was this evidence of the hospital's dark past? Or had something, or someone, been left behind in the aftermath of all the unexplained deaths? To make matters worse, during a paranormal investigation in the area, the EMF readings around the wheelchair spiked dramatically. The device beeped wildly, a clear sign of high electromagnetic activity, which many paranormal experts believe is linked to spirit energy. At the same time, cold spots began to appear around the chair. The temperature in the room dropped drastically, even though the building itself had long been abandoned with no power to fuel such changes. Some investigators swore they could feel a cold hand brush against their skin, sending them into a panic, while others remained frozen, unsure of whether to continue or flee. After hours of exploring the desolate halls, the team of investigators was on edge, their nerves worn thin by the mounting unease. But nothing prepared them for what happened next. It was James, the team's leader, who made the decision to approach the infamous wheelchair. He'd been skeptical at first, chalking up the previous stories to urban myths or the effects of old, dilapidated equipment. But now, with his flashlight trembling in his hand and his breath shallow from the cold, he couldn't ignore the presence that seemed to linger in the air. He took a few tentative steps toward the wheelchair, which was sitting eerily still in the middle of the hallway. The air felt heavier now, pressing down on him. A cold shiver ran up his spine, and he paused for a moment, unsure of what he was about to do. But then, he reached out, slowly, and placed a hand on the back of the rusted chair. In an instant, the wheelchair jolted forward with an unnatural force, as if some unseen hand had gripped the wheels. James froze, his heart racing. The chair began to move on its own, slowly at first, then faster, as it inched toward him, its metal wheels scraping against the floor with a sound that echoed through the empty hospital. He could feel the coldness of the chair's metal frame against his skin as it moved closer, the air growing colder with each passing second. His eyes locked onto the chair, his body paralyzed with fear. It wasn't just the movement that unnerved him. It was the feeling that something, or someone, was pulling the chair toward him, guiding it with malicious intent. He wanted to step back, to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. The chair inched forward, closer and closer, until it was only inches away from him. He could feel its presence, almost as if it were alive, and the fear that gripped him was suffocating. Just then, the team's equipment, which had been running flawlessly until that moment, began to malfunction. Their cameras, which had been capturing everything in high resolution, suddenly went static, showing nothing but a snowy blur. The temperature dropped even further, and a low, distorted hum filled the room. Then, clear as day, a voice, cold, unnerving, and impossibly close, came through the speakers. It was a whisper, a command: leave. The voice was so loud, so chilling, that it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The team looked at each other, their faces pale with fear. The voice was unmistakable, and the sheer terror it carried made it impossible to ignore. James, his heart pounding in his chest, stepped back, and as soon as he did, the chair stopped moving. But the message was clear. Whatever was in that hospital didn't want them there. So, was it simply the wind? Or could it have been a carefully orchestrated hoax? Or could there truly be something far more sinister at work here? Something tied to the restless spirits of this long-abandoned hospital? The truth remains locked away, hidden in the eerie silence that clings to the building's decaying walls. The terrifying presence that surrounds the moving wheelchair, the chilling encounters, and the strange anomalies that refuse to be explained. It all leaves us with more questions than answers. Despite the years of decay and abandonment, one thing is certain. This hospital holds a dark, oppressive energy, one that refuses to let go. Whatever it is that haunts this place, it's clear it wants to be left alone. Yet, the curiosity remains. But here's the question. Would you dare to set foot inside and experience it for yourself? Could you withstand the overwhelming sense of dread, the hair-raising moments of unexplainable fear, and perhaps even face the moving wheelchair that so many have tried and failed to understand? This hospital may not be a place for the faint-hearted, but for those brave enough to seek the truth, it might just reveal something far darker than anyone could imagine. If this gave you chills, wait until you hear about the other objects in this hospital that seem alive. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next terrifying discovery.